World War II was fought between the Axis powers and the Allied powers. An important question is, which side killed more civilians, the Axis or the Allies? Let's first look at how many were killed by the Allied powers led by the Soviet Union, America, and Britain. American and British bombing resulted in the deaths of 410,000 German civilians, 390,000 Japanese civilians, 60,000 French civilians, 24,000 Austrian civilians, 8,000 Romanian civilians, 3,000 Bulgarian civilians, and 2,000 Thai civilians. In total, 900,000 civilians were killed by American and British bombing during World War II. The British also caused a famine in India during the war, in which 2.1 to 3 million Indian civilians starved to death. Now, how many civilians were killed by the Soviet Union in World War II? Soviet military occupations resulted in the deaths of 400,000 Hungarian civilians, 150,000 Polish civilians, 51,000 Lithuanian civilians, 36,000 Estonian civilians, and 17,000 Latvian civilians. The Soviet government also killed between 1 million and 1.7 million Soviet civilians during World War II, mostly in forced slave labor camps, but also in mass deportations. Additionally, the Allied countries of Eastern Europe expelled their German-speaking populations, and these expulsions resulted in between 600,000 and 2.1 million German civilian deaths. In total, the Allied powers likely caused the deaths of between 5 million and 8 million civilians in World War II. Next, let's look at how many were killed by the Axis powers led by Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan. Starting with Japan. During the Japanese invasion and occupation of China, the Japanese killed at least 3.5 million Chinese civilians. 350,000 were killed by Japanese bombing, 200,000 were killed through biological warfare, 140,000 died due to forced labor, and 2.85 million were killed in massacres and atrocities by Japan. During the Japanese occupation of Indonesia, between 2 million and 4 million Indonesian civilians starved to death, and another 300,000 civilians died as forced laborers. Japanese occupation also caused a famine in Vietnam, in which 1 to 2 million civilians starved to death. The Japanese occupation of the Philippines caused 340,000 famine deaths, and Japanese massacres and atrocities also resulted in at least 90,000 Filipino civilian deaths. In Malaya, 100,000 civilians were killed in massacres and atrocities by Japan. Additionally, between 60,000 and 380,000 Korean civilians died due to forced labor by Japan. In total, the Empire of Japan likely caused the deaths of between 8 million and 11 million civilians in World War II. Now let's turn to the Axis countries of Europe. Nazi Germany and its allies killed almost 6 million Jewish civilians across Europe, including at least 2.7 million who were killed in extermination camps, 2 million who were killed in mass shootings, and 800,000 who died in Nazi ghettos. Most of the Jewish civilians killed were from Poland and the Soviet Union. Nazi Germany also killed between 10 million and 11 million non-Jewish civilians from the Soviet Union, mostly Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. 4 million Soviet civilians starved to death in the famine caused by the Nazis. 1 to 2 million Soviet civilians were slaves who died due to forced labor in Germany, and about 5 million non-Jewish Soviet civilians were killed in executions and shootings by the Nazis or died in German camps and prisons. During the occupation of Poland, Nazi Germany killed more than 2.7 million ethnically Polish civilians, the majority in camps, in prisons, and in massacres. 330,000 non-Jewish German civilians were also killed by the Nazis. This included 200,000 people with mental illnesses and intellectual disabilities who were forcibly euthanized. Across Europe, the Nazis and their allies killed between 130,000 and 280,000 Romani civilians, often referred to as gypsies. They were mainly killed in concentration camps and in executions or shootings. In Yugoslavia, the Axis forces killed at minimum 160,000 Serb civilians, 29,000 Croat civilians, and 14,000 Bosniak civilians. 130,000 French civilians, excluding Jews and Romanis, were killed by Nazi Germany. of whom 60,000 were political prisoners who died in captivity after being deported to Germany, 40,000 were slaves who died in Germany due to forced labor, and 30,000 French civilians were executed by German forces. During the German, Italian, and Bulgarian occupation of Greece, 56,000 Greek civilians were executed by the Axis forces. Another 38,000 non-Jewish civilians from Greece died in German concentration camps. Also, due to the occupation of Greece, 600,000 Greek civilians died of starvation. 60,000 British civilians were killed by the German bombing of Britain. 27,000 Dutch civilians died as forced laborers in Germany, and 18,000 Dutch civilians died in Germany as political prisoners. Additionally, 16,000 Dutch civilians died of starvation due to the German occupation. In Austria, the Nazis killed 35,000 non-Jewish civilians. 3,000 Austrian civilians were executed, and 32,000 died in concentration camps and prisons. In Czechoslovakia, the Nazis executed 15,000 ethnic Czech and Slovak civilians. Additionally, 7,000 Czech and Slovak civilians died in camps and prisons, while 3,000 died in Germany due to forced slave labor. And over 16,000 non-Jewish civilians from Belgium were killed by the Nazis. 3,000 civilians were executed, 8,500 political prisoners died after deportation to Germany, and 5,000 Belgian civilians died as forced laborers in Germany. In total, Nazi Germany and its allies killed between 20 and 22 million civilians in Europe. Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, and other Axis states likely caused the deaths of between 28 million and 33 million civilians during World War II. This is significantly higher than the 5 to 8 million civilian deaths caused by the Allies. The majority of civilian deaths due to bombings and due to deportations were caused by the Allies. Meanwhile, the majority of civilian deaths due to executions and massacres were caused by the Axis. The majority of famine deaths and forced labor deaths were caused by the Axis. And the majority of civilian deaths in camps and in prisons were caused by the Axis. I hope you found this statistical breakdown interesting or useful. All of the sources for these numbers are available in the description below. Thank you for watching.